So I just want to start by saying this is going to be, I love lecturing and I love dialogue, but this is a very personal program that I'm doing this time because I am doing something that many museums have asked me to do, and I've never done it until now. And if anyone's in Boca Raton next year in November of 2026, I have a solo museum show opening there with a survey of 40 years of my work. And I'm going to show some photographs. I'm not sure yet how, but I'm just going to show some photographs of my work next to paintings that are based on those photographs. So what I wanted to do today is, people always say, what makes a great photograph? And my answer is that the photograph should be an extension of your mind. Every photographer, and I'm showing you quite a few brilliant photographers today, some very famous, some not as famous, but I want you to understand, Cartier-Bresson always said, what makes a good photograph? It's the percentages. He believed in something called the decisive moment, that he would try and catch the right second to take a picture. Another artist who I love is Edward Weston. There was a beautiful show at MoMA many years ago that was one of the biggest influences on my life. I love Edward Weston. He's not my favorite photographer, but this showed you the outtakes. In other words, that famous picture of the woman on the dunes. It showed you the 10 pictures he took before and the 5 pictures he took after, and you'll understand why this is the one he picked. Another person like that is Fran Lebowitz. Fran Lebowitz now uses a digital camera, and she clicks many, many times, and she waits to get the exact right thing, and then she'll sometimes delete things that she doesn't want in there. All these things are kosher. There's no one right way to take a photograph. I'm going to say it twice. There's no one right way to take a photograph, and every great photographer has a mission, has an idea of what they want to do. So I was just in Athens working with Kivunim this past year, and it was very exciting for me to take the students around the city and show them how they can, number one, if they want to get rid of people, I'm going to show you what I did. I did not edit them later. I stood in a way that I could get rid of things that I didn't want to see. So I'm going to start off, let's go to the video, the thing, and then we're going to see all these other artists. You're starting with one artist named Tobi Kahn. So now, I love the Acropolis. Now, and I love, this is not the Acropolis, this is another ancient ruin, but I wanted you to see the largeness of the space without any people there. So I photographed on an angle. I went down to the ground and I looked up. So you can see that little bit of a cloud. I consciously placed, this is not edited, and this is not, you have to trust me. I didn't do this in the dark room or not on the computer. I just looked where I wanted it to look, and I wanted clouds around there. And I also wanted you to see another building that was a 20th century building that had put it into context, and it didn't look like it was a book. Now, could I have taken out that other building? Yes. I didn't want to. And I think that is a decision that each of you have to make. What do you want the story to be? It was raining that day. I waited until the rain, something went black. Shirel. Oh, there it is. Okay. So that's the first photograph. I don't want to spend too much time on there, but I want you to get the idea. I saw the shadow there. You take a minute to pick an image. I'm not like Ansel Adams, one of my favorite artists in the world. He would have his camera on a tripod, and when he did the famous, and he did time lapse, that is another way. He wanted to do the Grand Canyon, and he wanted that. I just wanted you to feel like, okay, I'm in Athens, Greece in 2025. I was really there in 2024, so it was a little earlier. but that's how I wanted to start the lecture. Now let's go to the next image. Feel free to ask me questions. Don't be shy. So then when you go up to the Acropolis, I don't know if you realize, we were tourists. There were hundreds of people there. What did I do? I waited until no one was there, and I wanted you to see, you see that ledge on the very bottom, that, so you could, on the bottom, you'll see a fence type thing on the right side on the bottom. I wanted you to see that, Shirel, you do that so well often. Can you see that on the bottom right there, right down a little further, right there? You see that? That fence is so you don't fall down. So I wanted you to understand that I did that consciously. I could have moved over a drop and not had that there. If I had moved it over a drop, you wouldn't realize that this has been made for people to not fall or get hurt. I also wanted the stairs there. I also love that door opening that looks like an upside down khamsa. I was very conscious of picking one entranceway that there's a little line there. I also wanted two openings that had trees in the background and one that had more ruins. This is very thought out, and I had to wait until people walked by. And that is something you have to be patient. And if you have a friend, that's what I had with some of the Kivunim students, I would say to them, all right, guys, I'll stand. Tell me what area you want. You can't pick a big area because otherwise you'll get people in there. I didn't want people in any of these photographs. Let's go to the next one. Now, this to me is my favorite of the pictures I took because you're looking out. Now, remember, I had to really wait to get people out of the way. This is a very complicated photograph to take because I had to stand on somebody's, I was on somebody's shoulders that I could get up there because I knew I wanted the line of that open window area, but I wanted to see the two pillars in the middle. And without the green olive tree there, I don't think it would have had the same poignant feel. Very conscious where the line is. When you have photography, you don't want to be too much in the center. So you see, I moved over to one side a drop. The one problem I had is you see that little line in the ledge. There's a line in the ledge. Now, if I would have been a different person, I would have gotten rid of that. I didn't want to play that game. If I was somebody else, I would have. And to be honest with you, for a better photograph, I would have gotten rid of it. But I wanted, for this lecture to the students and to all of you, I wanted you to see what you do when you don't edit. Shirel, I saw somebody had a question, but I didn't see it. Was that am I okay to keep going?
Yes, keep going.
All right. So take a look at the way the branches are now. Let's say you want to jazz it up. You can work on that in the darkroom. You can put in more blue, or you can put in more red. You can press something called sharpen. There are many ways to do it. These are all untouched. I love that tree. Who does it remind me of artistically? It reminds me very much of the way Cézanne would be painting on the sides of water, and he'd have a little tree in the foreground. It also reminds me of Bonnard. It reminds me of many different artists that make it feel like you're entering a set. It feels very theatrical. All right, and by the way, I forgot to tell you one other thing. Look on the all the way on the left. There, all the way on. Thank you. Right there, you see those two little things there. You see the shadow. I wanted you to see that. Again, all this is conscious. I also wanted on the very bottom. You see there's some shadows underneath there that makes you feel like you're going into the space. You can't always have somebody's shoulders to stand on. What you can do, though, is, and I know students that do that, you have one of those, I forgot what it's called. Shiro, what is that called? It's like a magical thing you attach to your phone and make it higher.
A selfie stick.
Yes. What is it called again?
A selfie stick.
A selfie stick. I use it not for selfies. I use it for going higher, and I can see what it looks like, and then I photograph, bring it down, look at it again, then move it up to get exactly what I want. So I want you to be aware that there are many ways to get things that you want. All right, let's go to the next one. Now, this is what I call a money shot. Now, the day before the Kivunim kids came, I met a former student of mine from SVA who was studying there, and I said to her, I want to be able to take some shots that are great. And she said, well, you have to get up early in the morning, and there's a beautiful other area a little further away, and you can get to the top of that, and you can get an undestructed view. So I'm on top of another hill, quite a bit away, and I took the students there early in the morning just so they could see this. Now, there are people in there, but they're very tiny, so they don't mess up the image. But I wanted to show you it on an angle. Now, most people would have done this in the middle. I wanted it to the side, and there's a rule of thirds, and I played with that rule of thirds. What is a rule of thirds? You divide up your picture. You have top, bottom, and middle, and I move the image. Put your hand, I'm sorry to be so pushy, but put your hand over. If you get rid of all that extra green on the side, it looks much flatter. You don't see that it's in a space. Because you have that open green and you have the background of those stones and mountains in the background, it makes you feel that you are looking at something and then there's something behind it. If you don't want that, you can zoom right in, but I don't think it's nearly as exciting. The other thing is always think about what time of day you're shooting. If you shoot at noon, you don't get nearly as many shadows. So I always pick to do it early in the morning or later in the afternoon when it becomes more dramatic. It's a real decision how you want everything to look. If you go on a trip somewhere, make your decisions. I will push you hard. If you were with me, I'm happy you're not going to be with me because I make everyone get up ridiculously early because you get, number one, there are not as many tourists around. And number two, the lighting is like 100 out of 100. It's just beautiful. Look at that shadow that goes on there. So you begin to understand how you're creating space. Now, let's say you want to work in a dark room or you want to work on your computer later. There are ways on your computer to enhance the colors. There are ways to show higher saturation. There are many ways to do that. There is nothing wrong with it. I'm going to say it a second time. There's nothing wrong with it. And when in the olden days, or when you had you worked in a dark room, there were certain tools you used, and I did that when I was in undergraduate school to make the colors, especially in black and white, either more saturated or less. And you would use a special tool to get rid of certain things you didn't want. Nothing wrong with it. I on purpose showed you things that I didn't do, but if I had like a whole day with you, I would have shown you as I sat there how you can manipulate it. I just wanted you to see that you don't have to manipulate. All right, let's go to the next one.
Toby, a couple questions came up.
Yes, I love questions. Yeah.
One, what camera are you using and what equipment?
Thank you, Sherelle. I love whoever asked that question. I have 9 cameras. Should I show you the camera that I use when I travel? You're going to all laugh. I'd rather show it to you than tell you. I only use, it's only a number 10, and I'm about to buy a number 15. Why do I use this? Because I'm very often lecturing and traveling. I brought one of my smallest cameras here to show you the only other one I now travel with, but I have so many cameras. I even have a Leica, but now if I use one of my other cameras, it is a Lumix. It's a very small one, and it's very good for it, but I have a Canon. I have so many cameras, but the older I get, and I'm not 18, 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60 anymore, I believe my strength is finding the right image to take, not the camera that I use. Now, if I were much younger, I still think I would maybe use a Leica. I don't know. I love cameras, and I have so many, but now I just use my phone.
Perfect. Another question, since you mentioned sunrise and the lighting, if you can say a few words about the golden hour.
All right. Now that is fascinating. So there are two times of the day that are just breathtaking. If one day I can come with you on a trip, I would make you come pre-sunrise, because pre-sunrise, the light, it's so diffuse. By the way, a lot of filmmakers use that time of day because it's a very quiet, flat light. There is another time of day that is right after sunrise, where you'll get these beautiful colors in the sky. I mean, the colors change every 5 minutes. And then another time of the day, if you want to have a very flat light, you do it when the sun is directly on top. And then another beautiful time is the hour before sunset. And I tell people that when I had my show at the Albright-Knox and at the Newberger, and I showed sky and water paintings, I was explaining to people that magic hour is when you're on the highway and the lights go on and off because they don't know if it's night or day yet. And that is a beautiful color as well. I mean, because it's very dense light, but it's not harsh light. Do you understand? I hope you understand what I mean by that. Look at Shirel's face right now. This is a perfect example. Or look at Ruth's face if you see her. Half her face is in light and half is not. And that's because the way the light is. Always think if the light should be behind you or in front of you. Always place what you're photographing. Think of where you want it. If you have the light behind you, it becomes the subject that you're seeing, it becomes much quieter. If you have the light going to you, it's much brighter. I like using light when it's not either right there, it's off to the right or off to the left. There is, and by the way, if you're going to take a serious trip and you really care, I would spend a day before you leave and photograph things that you know many times during that day, because that way you'll see what you like. And there is no right and wrong. You're going to see 5 photographers or 6. I forgot how many photographers. They all have very different attitudes, whether they want to shoot above you or below you or right in front of you. Also, if you're going with a friend or your partner or anybody, your children, your parents, your lover, anything, take 5 or 6 pictures and look at what side they look best at and only shoot on that side. If you're older, you see this right underneath my chin? Angle it so that you don't see all those years of the skin down there. If somebody has a receding hairline, find a way to not show that as much. In other words, think through what you want to do. The biggest trick I want to tell all of you is, if you want to do the Eiffel Tower, do the Eiffel Tower. If you want to do your friends in front of the Eiffel Tower, just get part of the Eiffel Tower. It's very hard to get both. It's not as interesting. If you have part of the Eiffel Tower, you know it's the Eiffel Tower. Do you understand what I mean? Otherwise, you look like a little midget in there. So always, and then again, if you want the whole Eiffel Tower and your friend, go on an angle below it so your friend looks much larger. Always think through what you want. Get rid of anything in the background you don't want. Anything that's there will be so distracting. What were you going to ask? Also, Sheila, what's the next one? You're muted.
We can continue.
Oh, good. All right. I hope these answer. Shirel, you're going to be the strict one. Now that I went back there at night, not to the same place because I didn't want to be in the same place. I asked the student of mine, where can I get the greatest night shots? This is not manipulated photography. This was in a little park that I went to at night. I know it's not straight. I didn't straighten it because I like the way it looks. And also, if you want to straighten it, you know, you have a grid on your phone or on your computer. You can always straighten everything. I didn't want that. Can you go back one, Shirel? I'm sorry to make you do that. You see what I mean here? Here, I wanted that straightness here. And I lined it up with the landscape in the background. Go back to this one. This one, I stood at an angle because I really wanted that one building to look much whiter and the other one to look much more yellow. And I love that cloud there. So that is right after sunset. And I very much, I don't know if you know, Blakelock is one of my favorite painters, and Albert Pinkham Ryder. They both use this type of light in their work. I just think it's brilliant. It also made me think of Magritte. You see the way I use the trees as a foreground. Now, I could have moved to the side and not had the trees there. I consciously wanted them. And you see in the very front on the left side, you see that? I love that. Cover that up and it looks too much like a silhouette. Do you understand? Put your hand over it. You want, and there's another little tree. I want a little definition in the foreground so it brings you up. Now, technically, I should have moved to the side because I don't like photographs where the cloud is almost in the middle. But I just loved the way it looked. So I threw out my rules and I just went with what I loved. Let's go to the next one. So I don't know about you, but I love museums. I'm a museum addict. And I thought to myself, look at these 3 or 4 beautiful sculptures. And I waited until 2 people were there to give me context. And I wanted you to see the next floor also. Now, I could have zoomed in because my camera, my phone has that. I wanted you to see it in context. I was conscious about having the floor below, the 2 people there, the glass coming through them, the sculptural elements, and then the floor above it. I wanted you to feel like you were in a museum. I wanted you to have that experience, but I wanted to make total control. I have to admit, I took 5 images. This is the only one I liked. I kept shooting it, and sometimes I had 3 people, and then I thought it was too trite. Then I had more of the top, and I didn't like that either. This one I really loved at the end. So if you're going to photograph in a museum, think what you're trying to tell the viewer about the museum. Sharon is leaving now, and she's heading home. All right, I'll talk to you later, Sharon. So I think that's important. What do you want to tell? What story are you trying to tell? Very, very important. I'm going to say it again. What story are you trying to tell? Are you trying to tell about how much you love a museum? Are you trying to tell a certain piece of art? Are you trying to tell how people look at photographs? One of my favorite young artists, Ariel HaKohen, I think is a genius. I've shown him to you as a group. He has a piece up, I think, in the Haifa Museum right now, where he photographed Stonehenge with soldiers using their cameras to photograph it. And you don't see that they're on their phone cameras and doing it, and it becomes part of the element. It's one of my favorite pictures that he's taken because everyone knows Stonehenge, but by doing it like that, it interprets another story. Let's go to the next. And by the way, there are other artists that who I love, who go to museums and photograph art and people in the museum. Sherelle, I'm going to get you their names. I can't remember it right now, but there are 2 great ones that I love. Candida Hoffer is one of them. And there are others that take these beautiful photographs in museums. All right, now, why did I take this picture and why am I showing it to you? Big decision. Did I want to get rid of that little TV thing on the top? I did, but and by the way, I did one image that doesn't have it in there, but for this class, I wanted you to see that it was there. Why did I take this? One of my favorite artists in the world is Morandi. I don't think there's anyone who paints bottles better than Morandi. When I saw this, I was walking by with the students and I said, oh my God, this looks just like Morandi's bottles. And I wanted to remember that because look at that beautiful blue, the white, the yellow, all these colors, very minimal colors. And it feels like there could be a play or a theater piece right in front of this. Let's go to the next. I'm watching my time. I'm sorry I'm spending too much. If I'm spending too much time, Sherelle, ask him if I'm spending too much time and I'll quicken it because I want to show the other videos very much.
There's a question about the way you use stairs in your photographs.
So I'm obsessed with stairs. I always have been because to me, it's about the journey. I have an obsession. People have different obsessions. Mine are with steps because it's always about going and coming. I'm fascinated about this idea that we're on this planet for such a short time, and we have to somehow live our life and do as much as we can. And to me, stairs tell so much. I do many, 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 many paintings. In fact, I think I'm going to show you one where I turn the stairs into abstraction. So I still get what I want. All right, let's go to the next. So I wanted to show you something that the Kivunim students kept saying to me, Tobi, how do you show that something took place in a place and you don't want people there? So we walked and walked, and I stopped. This is in a courtyard, and I said, this is how you do it. You have chairs that are set up. You know that there either was a Jewish minyan or an encounter group or a lecture because of the way the chairs are set up. Now, I have to tell you something that I did, and I'm a bit of a child. I don't know if you could tell, but there's 2 red chairs and a gray chair, and then a red chair and a blue chair. And I changed the order. I didn't like the way they looked, so I went in there and moved them around. Originally, there were 3 red chairs in the back and a gray chair and 2 blue chairs. I didn't like the way it looked, and I loved looking at the floor, and I played with the colors to play with the floor. I wanted the trees to feel again like they were pulling you together. All right, and you see the green on the very front and the bottom underneath that tree. I could have moved up a drop, but I wanted that there. Let's go to the next. So let's say you want to talk about how in cities today, I don't know if you know this, but in many cities today, you have a plot of land that you can't, you have certain laws and restrictions of how you build a house or how you add. I wanted you to see, this is the back of a beautiful house. And go back 2, and this is the back on that same block. Can you go back 2 or 3 where you see that? The other ones is the back of that. So this is all in one little section in Athens on the way that we were walking. I wanted you to see how in certain cities they have to work in an allotted space. It was a very conscious thing. So let's say you're traveling in somewhere that's very beautiful and you see the background. It's like going backstage at a movie or at a play. And I think for my students, I was doing this for them also, because I showed them, at the end of our walk, I showed them all the pictures I took to show them what they could be looking at. I always say, keep both your eyes open and remember that when you're documenting something, you're documenting it not only for yourself, but for the experience. Let's go to the next. So now I wanted to show you, people say to me all the time, how do your paintings relate to the photographs you take? This is how. I saw that beautiful photograph and I went like, I love how dense it is, but I wanted to create something more abstract. You can see exactly what I did. You see what I did? I took out most of the stuff I didn't want and I left the things that I did want. And I just want to show you 3 of these because people always say to me, how are you looking at things? And when you say to us, everything you do is based on a photograph, I'm showing you 3 examples, I think 2 or 3 examples. That's one. These are the stairs. And I love whoever asked that question, why am I so obsessed with stairs? Because these were stairs that were made and then put back. And I love the way on the painting I did, I have to be honest, I like more than the photograph because you feel like you're floating in space. And if you saw one of my favorite movies, Indiana Jones, when he's moving and he's trying to get out of, into somewhere and the stairs keep moving, I find that very powerful. This painting is going to be in the Boker show, by the way. It's one of my new paintings that I love because it alludes to stairs, but it also looks very abstract and it could be landscape based. It can be many, many different things. But I want to show you how I took something and changed it. Let's go to the next. That's it. I showed you to it. So now we're doing night scenes. So if you like somebody like, as I do, Magritte or any of the surrealists, how do you take a beautiful picture at night of a tree and give it its eeriness? And again, if I went too far down, you would see everything. I had to shoot it from way below. Let's go to the next. And this is, again, this is not doing anything tricky with my camera. I moved to a place where the light was behind. This is in a park and it's lit from the other side. And I stood in a place where I could get, it's like 8 o'clock at night. There's no light there, but there's light from the park. And there's the third one of, I want to show you how people say that's so abstract. This was, and that same walk that I took with the students, looking at the cracks in the wall, I did that painting. Let's go to the next, because I now want to show you everybody else's stuff. I think that's another I want to show. I haven't done the paintings yet, but these are going to become large paintings. These are going to be like 6-foot paintings. Let's go to the next. And that I already did a painting of. And again, I look at the way these stone walkways were made hundreds of years ago. And I don't know if you can notice, there's a shadow of a tree in the front. You can see there's a tree right in there. It's like a V. I wanted you to see that in there. Now, everyone says, I want to take pictures of sunrises and sunsets. I thought you said they're terrible. And I'm saying to you, no, take them, but find a way to tell a story that is very much yours. Again, either you put a tree on the side or you put something in the front, but make it beautiful. These are what's called money shots. They always, to me, look like Hallmark cards. I'm not a fan of them. I only put them in because all my students kept saying, but we want to take them. And I said, fine, find a way to take them that it's not so obvious. I think there's one more. No, it's not. Now we're starting with artists photographers who I love. So we're starting with, wait, does anyone have any questions about this part of the lecture? I tried to divide it in half. Any questions before we go on to great photographers? Great. So now we're starting with Dorothea Lange. I always put in the name of the person and a picture of her. Let me show you what she looked like. I think it's important that you see what people look like because they're people also. So let's see the first photograph of her. And I always put the year they were born and the years they died. So she was born in 1895 and she died in 1965. She became very famous during the WPA. And I think she was a genius. So let's watch her video.
(1933). The depths of the Great Depression. Almost 25% of the American labor force, more than 13 million people, out of work. Dorothea Lange, a studio portrait photographer in San Francisco, was so moved by the jobless and homeless in local breadlines and soup kitchens that she began making street portraits, showing in stark black and white what the shortage of work and hope was doing to people who were too often and too easily unseen and overlooked.
Look at the angle.
By the fall of 1935, Lange was working for the government's Farm Security Administration, documenting migrants from the Dust Bowl, masses of sharecroppers, tenant farmers, and their families, traveling in wheezing, overpacked motor cars between work camps and shantytowns. I am trying here to say something about the dispirited, the defeated, the alienated, said Lange, about the wounded, the crippled, the helpless, the rootless. Lange had personal empathy for the physically disabled. She walked with a deep limp, the result of childhood polio, which Lange said was perhaps the most important thing that happened to me. It helped her see in the migrants, as she said, things that were more important than how poor they were: their pride, their strength, their spirit. No photograph shows that better than Migrant Mother,
That's
an iconic Lange photograph, sometimes called the Mona Lisa of the Depression. Part of a sequence of shots Lange made in a California pea pickers camp in 1936, The image is a still photograph, yet deeply moving. The woman's face is layered with emotions, exhaustion, endurance, despair, dignity. Flashes of the human condition are in frame after frame of Lang's work, the value of family, of community, of a sense of home and a sense of humor. Photography, said Lang, takes an instant out of time, altering life by holding it still. A photographer could alter a viewer's life in profound ways. You have the power to increase his perceptions and conceptions, said Lang. Lang tried to do that on a national scale in her work documenting the forced relocation of Japanese Americans to armed camps after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. She was deeply moved by the patience, the forbearance of the internees, more than 100,000 held at internment camps, many of them children. Lang's photos also stood as evidence of the poor conditions that many African Americans suffered at the time, due in part to racial discrimination and injustice. Despite long and frequent bouts with illness, Lang worked as a documentary photographer through the 1950s into the 1960s. She died in 1965 at the age of 70. She had tried, she said, for a visual life, an enormous undertaking practically unattainable. I have only touched it, she said, just touched it. Today, Lang's photographs of the 1930s stand as dramatic records of the human costs of the Depression, as well as the dignity and the strength that helped Americans survive.
Okay, so I wanted that to be, now let me tell you something else. If you Google Dorothy Lang, you'll see 20 different things. I try and pick things that are no more than 4 minutes because I know we're in part of a class. Why did I start with Dorothy Lang? Because I think she's a genius, number one. And number two, when you go through hard times, is it better to ignore it or is it better to face it? And I believe it's better to face it. And I think she changed the way I think about situations like this. Now we're going to something totally different. Herb Ritz. I didn't want you to think everything should be happy, everything should be sad, everything should be documentation. I wanted you to see different people. Again, you'll see this is 4 minutes. There are tons of videos of Herb Ritz, and if you like any of these people, do some homework yourself, and you'll go in and find things, and you'll understand why I picked the ones that I picked. All right, let's go to this one.
When I'm looking through the lens, I'm breaking down things, I'm seeing something. I guess the thing that I most have found is I go for the moment.
Today we're here in the archive of Herb Ritz's work. We estimate that he shot close to 2 million rolls of film during his lifetime. What we're looking at here is the negatives, the transparencies, the contact sheets, the fine art editions, prints that were done from editorial and advertising assignments. Every magazine that Herb ever was published in is all held and archived and documented here in the vaults.
I like to push things, even in my commercial work. Sometimes there's not even a line with the editorial. It can even classify as fine art.
You see the contact
Looking
sheet.
at this particular job from British Vogue in 1988, you can see how Herb was working through his own process of capturing images. This particular session was with Tatiana Petitz in the desert in Southern California.
I do like large plains and areas of texture and light, like deserts or oceans. And I like the natural elements that abstract into light and texture and line and shape.
He wasn't stuck on that it was a fashion section for British Vogue. His eye was capturing something that was pleasing and of beauty to him.
Tatiana has the most unusual, strong oval face with the almond eyes and the strong lips, but it's her gaze, her inner self that always comes through just so strong.
He would look at every frame with a magnifying glass. He would mark the film. He had a darkroom staff. They would make prints. The quality of these prints that he was making were equal to the fine art editions that he would make at the end. This particular image ended up being the fine art edition print that was in the Getty Museum and other museum exhibitions. Herb's cameras were very simple. He worked with a Mamiya medium format camera for a large portion of his work. Had a 150 millimeter lens, which is, a portrait lens. The camera was just an extension of his body, and it was not something that was going to stand between him and the subject. They talk about a photographer and a shoot and a subject, it's like a dance. Well, Herb really did make it like a dance. He wanted people to enjoy the day and have fun with the day.
When I work with Jack Nicholson, for instance. So we were up in his study and I saw the magnifying glass sitting on his desk and I said, Jack, pick that up and play with it. And the next thing, it was a caricature of himself. It's really trying to capture an inner quality about somebody in an unorthodox way.
He allowed there to be a collaboration between him and the subject. He wanted something fresh and new and innovative.
You never think when you're taking the pictures that maybe in 30 years from now, that'll be a record of that time. What you're really doing each time you click the frame is that you're recording something. And sometimes you'll hit on something that will live on.
All right. We'll go to all right. So I just want, we have a few more and I'm watching my time. Sherelle, aren't these fun? I love these. I put them to play with each other, but I just want you to see, you see the little X's on there? That's called a contact sheet. And then I just wanted you to see how different people work with things. And he did not mind cropping insanely. Let's go to the next one. Oh, but wait, can't we show a picture of Stephen Shore? All right, all right. I like showing them a picture of them beforehand. I didn't Sharon put that down, or we didn't? I thought we did.
I can, it just means transition.
Oh, forget
with
it.
stop share because of Zoom.
At the end, I want everyone to see their faces, but you'll see them in there. Okay. This is 5 minutes. We might not go to the end.
Throughout the history of photography, we see photographers moving the bar regarding where they're finding charged material, what material they find of interest. And 50 years ago, it wouldn't have been found in a grilled cheese sandwich. I started photographing food as part of the series American Surfaces, where I was also photographing every person I met on the trip, every bed I slept in, every toilet I used, residential architecture, commercial architecture, every television set I looked at. There were a whole series of categories, and food was one of them. And food was fascinating. I engaged with it at least 3 times a day, and so it was a feature of the trip. And it was also, as with any of these categories, it was a way of opening a door into the culture I was walking through and exploring. The major visual issue for me with American Surfaces was how to take a picture that felt natural, is the term I used at the time. I wanted to take a picture that looked like seeing. If you can imagine the difference between how you speak and how you write, and that there is a little bit more formality, perhaps a little bit of a more staid quality to how you write. I wanted to explore that difference. Is there a difference between how I see and how I photograph? And why is there that difference? And can I overcome it by being aware of it? Uncommon Places grew out of American Surfaces. I wanted to be able to make larger prints, and the color negative film at the time wasn't really capable of it. So I wanted to go to a larger negative, and found that I liked working on a tripod. That led me to really alter the way I was working and began a long process of formal exploration of photography. So I got an 8x10, and that's the camera I used for the rest of the series. One of the realities of an 8x10 in color is that the process is very expensive. So I had to economize somewhere, and it was to only take one picture of anything. I mean that if I were photographing a building, I would choose one angle. It made any picture a much longer venture because I'd have to walk around and see the different possibilities. I didn't intend for this to be an educational process. It was simply an economic decision. But what I found was it was forcing me to decide, what did I really want? There could be 5 or 10 or more equally visually valid pictures made. There could be 100 equally valid pictures made.
Pay attention to
but
what
I
he's
had
saying.
to decide what I wanted, and I found that over time, doing this again and again and again, that a kind of certainty began to develop. In '73, I took a picture of a billboard with a painting of Mount Shasta on it. And behind the billboard was this spectacular sky that was far grander than the conception of the artist who painted the billboard, which was sitting in a kind of scrubby landscape. And it's a wonderful picture, but when I look at it, I sometimes think it's a no-brainer. And that I have other pictures like the one of the grilled cheese sandwich that's more about really looking at the world with attention, seen in the state of heightened awareness. Everyone knows the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and that's simply not true. There are some thoughts that it's impossible to describe in a picture, and there's an experience of looking at a photograph that no number of words can communicate. The more words you use, the longer it takes to read it, and you lose the simultaneity of the experience and the specificity of the description. That's why I take the picture. If I could put it into words with as much clarity and complexity, it would save me a lot of money on gas and a lot of time. I would just write it.
So that, I want to
grilled
get back
cheese
to your
sandwich.
basics for a minute.
I started.
That to me, if I had to break down the entire lecture that I'm giving today, I wanted you to see that, and that to me is so important. The idea of what you want the viewer to see. I hope you realize how different so far the first 3 are. The next ones are going to be equally different. But I want you to keep this in your mind of why you're taking a picture. What is the reason, and what is your goal for yourself, and what is your goal for the viewer? Let's go to the next one. I hope you're enjoying this. It's so much fun for me to show this to you.
I've been very fortunate in my life to go virtually all over the world many times for photographing. So I think photography has allowed me to observe the world, to travel the world, to have this enormous adventure through photography to examine cultures and people. And I can't imagine a better way to live one's life. I came to photography actually through filmmaking. When I was in university, I studied cinematography and theater. But while I was studying film, I started working for the school newspaper as a photographer, doing kind of assignment work. And I really started to love taking pictures. I became so kind of enamored with the still image that I eventually just decided that that's what I wanted to do, not be a filmmaker, but be a photographer. This is a picture I took in Mauritania in 1986. Mauritania was one of the most interesting places I've ever been, but it's also probably the most desolate place. Mauritania at that time, there was just sand and a couple roads, but there was a particular tribe there called the Tuareg, and these are people who traditionally wear this sort of blue dress. And There's also this French influence in West Africa, and Mauritania has that background as well. And this family, this boy, I guess his mother and grandmother were waiting for the bus or something, and they have these baguettes, which is really kind of interesting because they show that French influence, although they're in this really remote part of Mauritania. So I really love this picture, just this kind of 3 generations, and I really love the fact that this play of hands is really interesting as well. I was walking down the street in a very small village in Peru, and there were these children playing on the side of the road, and they were tormenting this boy. So I kind of walked over and I kind of tried to figure out what was going on. And you know, there are these boys doing what boys do. They're kind of torturing this kid and he's crying. And I made a couple of pictures and I asked him through the translator what's going on. And he didn't answer. He was so kind of upset. And he had this toy gun and he held it to his head. And after some time, he kind of ran off and the other boys sort of continued to play. What I think is wonderful about looking at pictures and photography is you can make up your own story or imagine or give meaning to what you think that picture means. And whether it's right or not, it's still something which I think is interesting to do.
So I want you to see here how people are looking at things. Some of them look for a minute. Sometimes they look longer. We can go to the next one because I'm very worried. Wait, stay that one. I forgot that one.
The way I work is simply by just getting up in the morning without any particular plan or agenda or idea about what I'm going to do. And I just literally walk out the door and kind of let the day kind of take its own path.
I wanted to stop there. You can watch the rest later. I just want to explain something. Do you understand? I'm showing you people that are so different and it's a conscious decision. And I wanted you to also see him talking at a museum where people are looking at his work. And also look at the backgrounds. They're very little backgrounds there. It's all about the person. And even if the background is there, it's very supporting. Let's go to the next one. I'm watching my time because I know I only have until 2:15.
My grandfather once told me that behind every artwork there's always someone with a vision, however spontaneous, absurd, irrelevant, or magnificent it can be. And there's always a reflection of you in what you create and in everything that you do. And these words, I always found it to be relevant when considering my work and other artists and their work. But with Vivian Maier, the mystery deepens. Vivian Maier, or shall I say Miss Maier, Miss Mayers, Miss Smith, or Miss V. Smith, such were the names or aliases under which she presented herself to others. When asked once what she did for a living, she responded, "I'm some kind of a spy." And she responded in a French accent, which she probably learned with her mother and grandmother, both French speakers native from Saint-Julien-en-Champsaur. And in a sense she was. She was a spy of the world, voraciously capturing what she saw, finding connections and multiple meanings, finding amusement in the irony of life, which she captured however candid, sordid, or tragic it could be. And her photography does present a reflection of herself, which is one we can only speculate upon, since her work was discovered by the world after she died. And putting this reflection together with what is known of her life, spending her early years between a little village in the French Alps and New York City, having a faded relationship with many of her family members, dressing in a different fashion, becoming an avid collector or hoarder of memories through paper clips, little bibelots, newspapers, clothing, which she insisted in keeping private. We have a sense of someone who simply had trouble fitting in. Someone who was described by those who knew her as a little eccentric, odd, and at times misunderstood. And so photography in this instant becomes more than a medium to capture and generate relationships with the surrounding world. Photography, at least to my eyes, in Vivian Maier's case, becomes a form of communication. It's a language without words or barriers. It's constituted of gestures, of details, of shapes and forms, of oddities and rare moments, captured by the eyes of someone who kept it all under wraps, yet was aware she was a good photographer. So I'm sure that, at this point, the question still poses for both you and me. Who is Vivian Maier? Her negatives seem to have been randomly acquired by John Maloof, 2 years before she passed away. And at the time of his finding, he was looking for historical photos of Chicago, a city where Vivian lived in for many years after leaving New York City in 1956. And although Vivian Maier was sadly never a real-life spy, despite photographing mainly during the Cold War years, she would work for the next decades of her life as a nanny. And while performing her duties, Vivian seemed to embody the spirit of a true Mary Poppins, taking the children she took care of on journeys through different parts of the city, some glamorous and others not so much. And her camera was with her during these explorations of the everyday life. In fact, her cameras were always with her, like an extension of her body. Such was her passion and her devotion to photographing her reality. And in this line, we can thus consider the idea of photography being a reflection of the artist she was. And her photos are perhaps among the most beautiful, faithful portraits I've seen of what it means to be human. To live despite what odds are given to us. And Vivian's work truly embodies so many different aspects of life. It can be ironically funny at times as she photographs people from different angles or inserts herself into the composition. It can be compassionate in some other instances as she captures those less fortunate and forgotten on the city's sidewalks. And it can also work as an homage to childhood and innocence, especially when her photos acquire this childlike, sincere, intimate relationship with its surroundings and its subjects. And through these words, we can build a perspective, perhaps even fill in some gaps of the many self-portraits she left behind, with qualities and characteristics of a woman who photographed the world for nearly 40 years, yet never had the opportunity to share her gold with others. And sharing gold in this particular case, can be a fitting comparison or metaphor, if you will, for Vivian's photography. Unlike what is believed by many, she was aware of her worth as a photographer and reached out at some point to a friend to have her work printed. And although the reasons of why this never happened remain forever a mystery, those who knew her claim she wouldn't have liked all the attention her photography got. In fact, they claim she would have not known how to deal with it due to her unique personality. And so, if she treated her photography as something precious, like gold, as those who knew her said she did, why would she not want to share it? What if she was just happy photographing for herself? I suppose photography is an art that involves a subject, an intermediate, in this case the photographer, and a viewer. But what if her intention was to just share photos with those more intimate to her? Would that take away any of the value of her photography? Certainly not. would that make the extensive print sales, books, and exhibitions arranged by John Maloof unethical? Possibly. But the question poses in my mind, however stupid it might be, that if she truly didn't mean to share her gold with us at some point in time, why would she leave it behind and sold it at some point in her life, and not burn it or leave it somewhere 6 feet under, like some artists did? Perhaps we can also add into the question that Vivian did struggle with money for some time in her life, and lived in poverty her later years, which might have contributed to the anonymity of her photography. And this detail also emphasizes all the controversy, all the mysticism and fascination surrounding Vivian Meyer's story.
Okay, I want to stop
And I
here because I
guess
want to give time. I want to give time. You can watch this on your own later. We have 7 minutes left, and I really want to hear any questions. I want you to understand that's the last photographer I'm showing, right, Cheryl? So I knocked out 2. I had more, but then I was scared I wouldn't have enough time, and I'm very time sensitive. But I'm hoping you understand how I picked those artists and what is so important about what each of them have to say. I am of the belief that she wanted people to know her, but she couldn't deal with it. And I think what she did was kind of brilliant because everyone I mean, Cheryl, had you known her work before or not? Yeah. So most people I know in the arts have heard of her because she's really a cult. She has a cult following now, but she did it her way. And I love when they say she was a nanny, whereas Herb Ritz had a huge team behind him. I picked people that look at their work in a very, very different way. And I wanted to start off with somebody who works for the WPA. You know, I wanted to show you how photography can be a way to communicate what the artist / photographer wants to say. Now, I'd love to hear, let's hear what anyone has to say. I'm so curious. I gave you time because, yeah.
So there was a question about street photography today, which is different maybe from what it was and can be very difficult in terms of people not wanting to be photographed. So can you say a little bit about how you approach street photography?
So the trick that I tell everyone is, if you really want to do street photography and have no problems, get a long lens that you can be far away and zoom in. I don't choose to be that way. I just walk around, and as long as you don't go right into somebody's face, you won't have a problem. If you can't go into their in their space and do it. But I have never, and I'm quite a grown-up, I've never had a problem with people. Either they walk away if they don't want to be photographed by me, or they turn around, or but I as long as you don't get up really close, I think you have to give like a 10-foot radius. And I think you have to take the picture quickly so that it doesn't annoy anyone.
Okay.
So from a legal point of view, you don't have a problem if it's in the street. You can't do it through somebody's window.
Thanks. So another question from a different angle was, what do you see as the top 3 mistakes that people make when they're taking photographs?
Thank you. Number 1 by far, decide, I'm going to say it very loud, decide what you want in the picture. Don't try and do 2 things. I'm going to say it again and again and again. I've been teaching photography for 40 years, not 10 years, 20 years. And I always tell people, what do you want your picture to be? Think it through. Don't try and do 2 things. If you want to do your family, get them in a plain background. If you want to have them with the Eiffel Tower, as I say, just get the bottom of the Eiffel Tower. Don't try and do 2 things at a time. That's the biggest mistake by far. Second mistake, don't have the light behind the person. Find the right dimension. Take a minute. You're a grown-up. No one here is like 5 years old. Take a minute. Look at where the light is in relationship to the people you're photographing. And the third thing is, if you want people to look good, find the right, and especially if you know the people you're photographing, find the right angle for their faces. Watch this. If I look like this, it looks terrible. If I look like this, it looks much better. Find the right side. My nose curves one way, so I always make sure I'm photographed the other way. Both my eyes are not the same size. Always think through what you're doing. Take the time, take an extra 30 seconds to feel it all through. But by far the most important is decide what you want your photograph to be and see where the light is. Those are my two biggies.
So another question was, you were mentioning know what story you want to tell, but very often, especially when traveling, there's no time for that, or you're stopping somewhere, it's very quick and you're moving on. So how would you suggest to handle that?
So I would take two pictures. I would take the picture. Nessa, who I love, was my wife. She gave a lecture with me once that I'll never forget. She told all the students, write a letter that you would write to your parents, and then write something you'll put on Instagram. And they're very different types of things. And I think when you're taking the picture, you can take the picture of a memory of what you did, and don't think about that as an art piece, and then take the piece that is artistically the way you think of it, even if you have no time. By the way, another thing that I really care about, I don't think it's bad to photograph when you're on a bus anymore. I used to be very against it. I'm not anymore. Or if you're in a train, or if you're in a car, or if you're, no matter what you're in, I think use that as part of the piece. So, just decide what you want to do. Some days, I decide I only want to photograph landscape. Some days I want to photograph people. Just decide what you want, what the goal is of that day.
Okay, I think we have time for two more questions. One is, what are your thoughts about selfies?
I'm not answering.
Okay, that's good. We have time for another question then.
All right, no, I don't want to be a baby. I think it's so over. The thing that bothers me is I gave a lecture once and somebody came over to me. People don't spend more than 3 seconds on looking at a great piece of art, and they take 10 seconds for selfies. So, I don't want to say more than that.
Okay. Another question is, if there are any current exhibits of the photographers you showed.
No, there are none. No. This is, I was picking for today. Cheryl, you haven't done this. I've done quite a few lectures on great American photographers. I've done lectures on great Israeli photographers. This was for this lecture. To be honest with you, they're not my favorite. They're not my favorite. I mean, I love them, but I have many photographers I like even more. Like, I love Ansel Adams. I love him. I just think he's like, oh my God. But today was about photographing for when you travel, because they're very different ways of thinking.
Perfect. Great segue into the last question. Your personal favorite photographer that didn't make it into today's session.
Cheryl, how long have you known me? I don't have one. I have to give you like 3. All right. I'm sorry, because I collect photography. So I love Cartier-Bresson. I think Cartier-Bresson was like a Godel Hador. I love Gursky. There's so many. I feel terrible to do this. There's so many great photographers. I'll give you a few more. There's a photographer who I bought very early on. Now I have to remember her name. I saw her I saw them in a small show in Chelsea, and I saw the image, and they did a show at the Met with Dorothea Lange and them. I'll get Sam Conti. I love Sam Conti. Anyone know Sam Conti? Nobody knows Sam Conti. But they have become very famous. And I bought a piece. I saw a show. I knew nothing about them. I went insane for the photograph. My wife and I have a special budget. I went over the budget. And then a month after I bought it, the gallery called me and said, wow, the Met just bought that same print. And then a year later, and they said, did you talk to anyone at the Modern? And I said, no. So I was the first person who bought the piece, and then the Met and the Modern. I just find their work, wow. But, and then I love an amazing Israeli photographer, Ariel Cohen, who I think is very gifted. And I've given a lecture on him, didn't I, Sherelle? We did one together. There's so many great photographers. They're not 1, 2, 5. I collect a lot of photography. Oh, you know who does great photography? Kiki Smith. I own 3 of her photographs. Most people know her as a painter and as a sculptor, but she does gorgeous photographs. I'm looking, oh my God. I love, oh God, Steichen. I own a Steichen. I love Steichen. There's so many, I'm telling you, I could do a whole day on 100 photographers who are my favorites. So there are many great photographers.
Tobi, thank you very, very much. Thank you everyone for being so engaged and managing the new Zoom chat so beautifully. I'm impressed. Tobi, thank you very much. We're looking forward to having you more in the future.
Thank you all for showing up. I love doing this program. You guys rock and roll.